So, because I have such a vivid imagination, I think, I've
Mhm.
always been a very, wild dreamer. We've talked about things like
Yeah.
this before, and it's the standing joke between Cody and I that he very rarely sleeps, very rarely dreams when he sleeps, but I dream all the time, like,
Mhm.
every night, and often when he does dream or when he has a nightmare, they're the most mundane things you can
Oh.
imagine, and I'm like, I love that your brain is just like, that's the level of stress you're working with.
Mhm.
So last night, he had a nightmare that he couldn't shower because we ran out of water. And
That's
and
wholesome.
he's like, in the dream, he's like, there was just like there was all this stuff blocking the shower. So he's like, I need a shower. So he started moving all this stuff out of the way. And then he gets to the shower, turns it on, and it starts, and then it just like sputters and stops. And then he was like, that was it. That was the end of my dream. He's also famously had a dream where his hair grew long, and not like he had short hair and he woke up with like metalhead long hair.
Mhm.
It just grew a little bit longer, like an inch longer. And I'm like, what are these? I'm having like zombie apocalypse dreams.
Yeah.
I'm having dreams where like invisible monsters are chasing me. I'm having dreams where I'm like arguing with my dad. Like, and then he's just like, no, or like the one time he had a nightmare that gas prices were a little bit high.
I mean,
A
that is a
little bit
nightmare.
high. Not like really high, but like a couple of cents high. So I don't
That's
know.
so
I
wholesome.
know, right?
I think I'm going to start recording all the stuff that Steve says in his sleep. Like, I'm at least gonna write it down because it's, like, so late,
Yes.
and I wake up and he's just having conversations, and I'm like, "Okay, I need to try to remember this, I need to try to remember this," and of course, I forget by the time I wake up.
Oh, of course. It's like the people that have dream journals. Like,
Yeah.
kudos to you if you are actually like diligent about using them. Because if I woke up, I'd probably write something and then in the morning I'd wake up and read it and be like, that makes zero
Oh, yeah,
sense. Like, it's
definitely.
just like a mash of words.
Speaking of dreams,
Yeah.
shall we delve into this nightmare?
I mean, that is a great segue, and it is a nightmare. So, hello everyone, I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
Before we jump too far into the nightmare, I do want to just say a little positive thing. Our merch is up and running and fixed again.
Mhm.
So if you want to get your hands on some Grim Curriculum merch, you definitely can. thegrimcurriculum.threadless.com. T-shirts, notepads, all sorts of things for your home and your body. So if you want to go check out some merch, you can definitely do so.
I spoke with a listener yesterday
Mm.
who is expecting and has purchased some adorable baby onesies. You know
Oh,
who you
heck
are.
yeah.
Congratulations. You are amazing. I'm so excited
I
for
love
the
that.
Grim Baby fan club.
Yes, no kidding. Oh my goodness, that's so sweet. Just one little positive thing
We need to keep it positive.
before we dive into the blah.
We last left off with the murder of Shirley Robinson and her unborn child that Fred had fathered. Like we mentioned before, Rose was also pregnant at the time. Shortly before Shirley was killed, she gave birth to yet another child, a girl they named Tara. This one had been fathered by one of her clients.
By 1977, Rose's father had begun to approve of her marriage with Fred and even started a business with him. The two opened a cafe that they named the Green Lantern, but the venture was a failure that didn't last long. I wonder if the name was comic book inspired or just, I mean, I guess the inspiration came from somewhere.
I thought about that and I couldn't find an answer. I don't think Fred was that whimsical.
I don't think so either. Although, I mean, the Green Lantern comics, I don't know if they were around in the 70s. I feel like they would have been.
I mean, probably. Like, we're getting pretty close to the 80s now.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
comic book listeners, let us know. Did the Green
Yeah.
Lantern, was the comic even thought of in 1977?
Speaking of business ventures, it didn't take long before Rose's father realized that his daughter was a sex worker, and soon after, he became one of her clients.
Oh, that is so gross and nasty. And I'd kind of forgotten about that little tidbit of info. And then I read ahead as you were reading it, and I was like, oh no. Yeah.
We talked about this last week, but this is definitely a story where you think it can't get worse, and it just does not stop.
Oh, it doesn't. It wouldn't be long before Rose was pregnant yet again, and in November of 1978, they had another daughter that they named Louise.
If the constant slew of babies being brought into this horrific household wasn't bad enough, it was around that time that Fred impregnated his own daughter, Anna Marie. It was an ectopic pregnancy and was ultimately terminated.
When she returned home from the hospital, Rose beat her mercilessly, focusing on her abdomen. Soon after, Anna Marie left home to live with a boyfriend. Fred quickly turned his attention to May and Heather.
It's clear that the West children knew what was going on in their home. As they got older, they realized that some of them had very different skin tones and were told by Fred that this was because their great grandmother was a black woman.
This was, of course, a lie. They had been fathered by one or some of Rose's clients.
In June of 1980, Rose gave birth to their second son, who they named Barry. The amount of children that these people have, all they do, like, is have babies and kill people.
Well, I think to some degree as well, they've realized, as we kind of mentioned last episode, is they've perfected their mode of
Mhm.
cruelty, torture, and murder. But they've also perfected the fact that they can just produce their own little victim pool
Yeah.
to practice their cruelty and torture on. And it's awful.
Yeah, definitely.
2 years later, Rosemary Jr. was born. Once again, Fred was not the father.
The next year, they had another child who they named Luciana. I did some reading about what
Hmm.
Rose was like as a pregnant woman
Yeah.
because I was thinking about, pregnancy, obviously, it alters your emotions
It
and
certainly
things like
can,
that.
yeah.
Apparently, during a lot of her pregnancies, and I feel bad even telling you guys this,
Oh, no.
she would be heavily pregnant
Uh-huh.
and she would wear short dresses with no underwear.
Oh,
And she would
God.
sit on the porch with her legs completely spread open as all the people walked by.
That is absolutely foul and nasty.
Now you know.
Oh, thank you for sharing. When she was younger, Rose had had a hard time managing just two children. Now they had a house full of kids, and the stress of it all did take a toll on her already horrific anger. She would scream at the kids and beat them with little to no provocation.
May, Heather, and Stephen became very close, and in an attempt to escape their abuse, they made a series of rules that they all had to follow. For starters, Heather and May would try to never be alone in a room with their father. The girls would only shower or bathe if he was away from home, and one of them could stand guard at the door.
Stephen was also told that when he turned 17, he would be forced to have sex with his mother.
So when
Ugh.
they told him that, and it was Rose who told him that, he's 16, obviously, and she says, when you turn 17, this is what's going to happen. And he said no, and they kicked
Yeah.
him out.
Ugh. I mean, good for him for standing up to them and kind of a blessing that they kicked him out, to be honest.
Yeah.
Good God. It seems that out of all of the children, Heather was most often the target of the abuse. This understandably affected her very deeply. She would bite her nails until they bled and developed a drinking problem.
She would also nervously rock anytime she sat down in a chair and was often seen cautiously watching Fred out of the corner of her eye.
Her parents, noticing her behavior, simply resented her further. They concluded that this was happening because Heather was suppressing homosexual feelings. Fred taunted her over this and often called her ugly or a bitch. When she approached Rose about this, she responded by laughing at her. Pretty wild to me that these parents, if you can call them that, are judging their daughter
Mhm.
because they think she might be gay. Meanwhile, they are doing all sorts of things with men, women, and everything
Mhm.
else. Not to mention all the despicable things they're doing with people and children and whatever else have you. But they're judging her for this?
Yeah.
The hypocrisy is simply like baffling.
Despite her constant torment, Heather was considered to be very well liked by her peers. She confided in some of her friends about what was going on in the house, and it was clear to them that she was suffering from severe psychological distress.
Heather attempted to hide the signs of the physical abuse as best she could and would often avoid taking showers after gym class with the rest of the girls. On one occasion, she was forced, and both of her peers and the staff noticed that she had welts all over her body. She claimed that this was the result of fighting with her siblings, but later told a close friend that it was done by her parents.
The children were told to never talk about what went on in the home, But by the mid 1980s, word began to spread throughout the school about Rose West being a sex worker. Heather denied these claims but admitted to another close friend that they were true.
The friend went to her father, who approached Fred about the allegations. He responded by no longer allowing Heather to go anywhere without him.
Heather graduated in 1986 and applied for numerous jobs in an effort to escape the home. One of these jobs was at a camp in Torquay. To her, this would have been the perfect opportunity to not only earn some money, but to get away from the home for the summer.
Tragically, her application was rejected. That night, May and Stephen heard her crying loudly. The following morning, she sat on the couch and sadly watched her siblings leave for school.
That would have been just awful because to these kids, at least they can go to school for the day and they can
Yes.
escape the home. But now she's out of school.
Mhm.
She doesn't have a job. Fred's watching her. She can't just go to a friend's
No.
house. She's stuck there.
Oh god, and the application failing, like, you
Yeah.
think, there's that little chance it's gonna come back, and then I'm gonna be out of here scot-free, and then the failure and thinking, like, "Is that a sign I should just give up, like,
Yeah.
altogether?" And not only that is, if she had gotten through with that application or if she had managed to escape when that this was all happening, it would have been a sign to her other siblings
Mhm.
they could also get out of there too, that
Yeah.
there was a chance for a life much different to this hellhole. When the children had returned home from school that day, they were informed by their parents that Heather had gotten the job after all and had left the home. This was despite Rose telling a neighbor that Heather had run away from the home after a particularly brutal fight between the two of them.
Friend then asked Stephen to help him dig a hole in the garden.
As we know now, Heather West had been murdered by her parents and buried in the hole dug by her brother. The truth would not be revealed until her body was found almost a decade later.
It didn't take long before the other children began to ask questions, especially May and Stephen, who had expected Heather to stay in touch with them. Fred and Rose changed their story and told them that Heather had ran off with a lesbian lover. When they suggested filing a missing persons report, Fred told them that this would be a bad idea because Heather had engaged in credit card fraud and would get in trouble.
To quell their suspicions, Fred and Rose paid someone to call them pretending to be Heather.
Clearly, they didn't care all that much because they began threatening to bury the children in the garden like Heather anytime they misbehaved.
So the story drops pretty much immediately, and then they're like, be good, or we'll bury you in the backyard like your siblings.
Yeah.
Ugh. Meanwhile, Rose continued to advertise her services in various magazines, and along with that, the two also looked for women who would do sex work for them. Rose was thrilled with this arrangement and acted as a madam along with engaging in sex work herself.
One of these women, Catherine Halliday, became close with the West, but upon seeing their collection of latex bondage suits, whips, and chains, she broke off her relationship with them.
Well, I can't imagine that's everybody's cup of tea, and not
No.
to mention Fred and Rose West are just vile human
Hmm.
beings. In May of 1992, Fred asked Louise, now 13 years old, to help him bring some bottles into a bedroom. Her siblings heard her screaming and found her writhing in pain on the floor. She confided in them that she had been sexually assaulted by Fred while he strangled her.
Louise told Rose what had happened, and her mother simply replied,
Well, you were asking for it.
It's
It's so foul and
it really
awful,
is.
and the absolute antithesis as to how you're supposed to behave around not only other human beings, but your own goddamn
Mhm.
children. Like that's I say it a lot when we're talking about these horrific people is kids, even if you're someone who maybe doesn't want kids of your own or
Yeah.
doesn't really feel like you have much of a maternal instinct, you know that at the end of the day, a child is to be protected,
Yep.
right? Like I would go so far out of my way to protect a child. And then there's these absolute monstrosities doing horrible things to their own children. You just can't wrap your head around it.
The assaults happened 3 more times and were witnessed by Rose, who filmed them. Louise eventually confided in a friend who told police what had happened. The case was assigned to Detective Constable Hazel Savage.
Who is a badass.
Yep.
Like this woman is legitimately like a super cop. She was already well aware of Fred and his criminalities, and she had spoken to Rena on multiple occasions prior to her murder.
She had it out for Fred,
Oh, I'm so glad someone did.
and I love that it was a woman.
Me too. And also, her name's Hazel, and that's my mom's name,
Yeah.
and I love that.
Hazel Savage was able to obtain a search warrant for the property, and on August 6, 1992, police arrived at 25 Cromwell Street in an effort to search for evidence of child abuse. They found copious amounts of pornography, some containing children. Rose was arrested for assisting in the sexual assault of a minor, and Fred was arrested for sexual assault and sodomy.
Fred was taken to jail, unlike Rose, who was allowed to stay in the home. The younger children were taken into government care. Rose explained that Heather had run away and that she had given her money to start a new life.
Constable Savage began interviewing anyone who knew the West that was willing to talk. This included Anna Marie, who spoke to her about not only the years of horrific abuse that she had endured, but also the disappearance of Heather, Charmaine, and Rena. She looked into the tax records of Heather, and from this, she concluded that she had not been employed or seen a doctor in 4 years.
Rose, quickly realizing that her world was now crumbling around her, attempted to take her own life. Stephen found her and saved her life, and after this, she spent most of her time watching Disney movies and eating sickening amounts of candy.
It's really giving Carla Homolka.
Just like rescinding back into
Yes.
this like childlike state
Mhm.
almost. Ugh.
Fred became depressed while in prison. Luckily for them, two of the key witnesses had decided not to testify, and the case once again collapsed.
And this is collapsing after it's escalated.
Mhm.
Oh, you see it not only time and time again throughout true crime history, but you see it time and time again in this
Yep.
story. But Constable Savage refused to give up on the case, and she continued to investigate the disappearance of Heather in the hopes that it would reveal the fates of herself, Charmaine, and Rena.
The detectives retraced Fred's history and confirmed that neither Rena nor Charmaine had been seen since 1971. On February 23rd, 1994, police finally obtained a warrant to search the property for Heather's remains.
Shockingly enough, they almost didn't get permission to search the cellar and the garden due to how expensive it would have been. Luckily, it was granted.
The following day, the police visited the home and showed the warrant to Rose, who became hysterical. They continued to ask her questions about Heather, and when Rose gave conflicting information, she shouted,
I can't fucking remember. It's a bloody long time ago. What do you think I am? A bloody computer?
"You make her sound too classy."
So sorry.
I'm hearing more like Cockney accent.
I'm actually not super familiar with what like a Gloucester accent would be. I couldn't tell you for certain because Cockney's like a little further south.
Yeah.
My accent's weird because I've been in Canada so long, so it kind of goes back and forth between Canadian and
Mhm.
English and depends who I'm talking to. So I don't know what she would really listen to some interviews, I guess.
Yeah. Fred offered to give a witness statement to the police regarding his daughter. He also said that she was alive and well and working for a drug cartel. He told them that his claims about her being buried in the garden were rubbish.
That evening, the search team left the home. May and Stephen overheard their parents speaking in hushed voices and pointing at the garden. The following morning, Fred told Stephen that they had done something terrible and that they were going to sell the house.
When the police returned, Fred told them that he was ready to give a full confession in regards to Heather. At 11:15 a.m., he told them that he had killed her in a fit of rage and dismembered her body. He also said that this happened while Rose was with a client and that she had no knowledge of the murder.
The following day, police began excavating the garden. Fred had shown them where he had buried Heather. A few hours later, they found a thigh bone in a spot that he was adamant that they wouldn't search. They then found what they described as a mass of jumbled human remains.
Apparently, when they found this thigh bone, one of the investigators goes to Fred and he says, "Listen, there's
Mm.
either another body here
Hmm.
or Heather had 3 legs." And Fred's like, "Okay."
Well, like, again, don't give this man any credit for any kind of intelligence
No.
because he's a dumbass.
Yeah.
Of course, they're gonna start finding other things.
Yeah, but he literally, like, pointed to the spot. He's like, "You don't have to look in this area." And they're like, "We should probably
We
look in
should
this area."
probably take a magnifying glass through this little section.
Several hours later, it was confirmed through dental records that the remains belonged to Heather West. That evening, Fred was questioned about the thigh bone. He confessed that there were two more sets of remains, one belonging to Shirley Robinson, who he described as a pregnant lesbian, and that another belonged to her friend.
He couldn't even remember her name. And also, why do we need to call her a pregnant lesbian?
I don't understand what his fixation is on just calling people lesbians.
Is it because in his mind he's talking to the police, perhaps in a time when, being gay was not quite as accepted?
Mhm.
Was he thinking that the police would look down on her if he was like, "Yeah, she's a lesbian." Even though again, him and his wife are participating in all sorts of twisted,
Yeah.
nasty, deviant perversions.
The thing I've grown to accept with this story is I'm never going to understand it.
No, absolutely not. You don't want to.
Now that two sets of remains were found, investigators decided to search the entire property. Rose was sent to a safe house while the investigation was conducted. Shortly after, Fred wrote a note saying that he wanted to confess to 9 more murders.
They questioned him further, and he admitted that there were 5 more bodies in the cellar and one beneath the bathroom floor. Fred continued to maintain that Rose knew nothing about the murders and that the majority of the women had been killed after they threatened to tell her about their affairs with him. He also maintained that he had not sexually assaulted any of his victims.
Fred agreed to return to the property to show investigators where the bodies were buried. They conducted this search between March 5th and 8th. Despite her husband's loyalty when it came to protecting her, Rose completely abandoned Fred as soon as she could, claiming that she was only a victim. Police continued to attempt to tie her to the crimes.
Fred was questioned about Mary Bathome, and despite his willingness to talk to the police, refused to share any information that he may have had about her.
Rose was finally arrested on April 20th in regards to the sexual assaults of an 11-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy in the 1970s. She was questioned further about the murders and ultimately charged in the deaths of Heather and Linda Goff.
On June 30th, 1994, Fred was charged with 12 counts of murder and Rose with 9. This was the first time the two had seen each other since the investigation began. Fred placed his hand on Rose's shoulder in an attempt to comfort her. She winced and refused to make eye contact, still maintaining that she was simply just a victim.
In the months following his arrest, Fred became depressed and was placed on suicide watch, but this was eventually lessened. He wrote to Rose and was shattered when she refused to reply to him. She played the role of a grieving mother. Fred attempted to get the children to communicate with her, but she continued to ignore him.
As a response, Fred withdrew his confessions that he acted alone and stated that she acted with him.
On January 1st, 1995, Fred West used a blanket and tags that he had stolen from the prison laundry bags to construct a noose. He placed it around his neck and ended his life. The following note was found in his prison cell.
To Rose West, Steve, and May, well, Rose, it's your birthday on the 29th of November, 1994, and you will be 41 and still beautiful and still lovely, and I love you. We will always be in love. The most wonderful thing in my life was when I met you. Our love is special to us. So, love, keep your promises to me. You know what they are. Where we are put together forever and ever is up to you. We loved Heather, both of us. I would love Charmaine to be with Heather and Rena. You will always be Mrs. West, all over the world. That is important to me and to you. I haven't got you a present, but all I have is my life. I will give it to you, my darling. When you are ready, come to me. I will be waiting for you.
The following month, Rose pleaded not guilty to all the murders. It was pointed out that Fred had been in prison for a number of them, and therefore Rose must have been the one who carried them out.
After 7 weeks of testimony, the jury concluded a unanimous guilty verdict. Rose was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Like we mentioned before, at one point, She carried out a relationship with fellow serial killer wife Myra Hindley, who acted with her husband Ian Brady, but the two broke up with Rose claiming that Myra was too dangerous.
I suppose that's what happens when two toxic ladies get
Yeah.
together. Rose is still alive and well. She maintains her innocence and occasionally works as a hairdresser. She's in good health and also apparently enjoys baking and receiving foot massages.
Ugh.
Ugh, nope, don't like that. She has been the target of some aggression from other inmates. Well, I honestly hope she's harassed every day till the day she dies. But she wins them over by giving them cookies and treats. Also, hate that. In February of 2019, Rose was reported to be, and I quote, dangerously overweight and is often out of breath and requires help to get off the toilet. She also attempted to legally change her name to avoid ties with her crimes. Girlfriend, you get that one for life,
Yep.
sees. No, you don't get to just change your name. You're still in prison. Screw you.
She had to switch prisons because there was one female serial killer who recently went into the same prison as her, and she
Oh,
got there and she told every single person, including staff and other inmates, she's like, "Rose West is here. I'm going to be the one who kills her. Watch me do it."
damn.
And so they had to move her.
Well, I mean, hey, if you tell everybody you're gonna do it, they're probably gonna move your target.
Yeah.
But still,
As for their children, they have all been haunted by the crimes of their parents. Anna Marie's husband gave an interview this year on behalf of his wife, and he said,
it's the siblings who live with the misery and pain of what went on in that house, and the trauma is probably too much for them to have any contact. Even though some of them live near each other, they don't speak or see each other because it only opens up old wounds.
As for May, she wrote a book in 2018, which she titled Love as Always, Mum XXX, about her struggle coming to terms with her parents' crimes. In the book, she speaks about how difficult it has been accepting who they were and the complicated relationship that she had with them.
Barry West took his own life in 2020 at the age of 40. He struggled with mental health issues and at the time of his death was living in an assisted living facility.
Tara, Louise, Rosemary Jr., and Luciana were taken into foster care in 1992 and have since changed their names to protect their identities.
Stephen cut ties with his mother in 1999. 3 years later, he spent 9 months in prison for the statutory rape of a 14-year-old girl. Oh, that's
Just
upsetting.
continuing the cycle. I was so disappointed
Oh, that
to
it
find that
that
out.
is really disappointing. Today, he works in construction and is married with two children. He states that his kids do not know about their grandparents, but it's probably likely only a matter of time before they find out. That's true.
He is shown in interviews in the new Netflix documentary. The kids are
Yeah,
going to find out.
100%.
25 Cromwell Street has long since been demolished. All contents of the home were incinerated to keep people from taking souvenirs. A patch of grass and an alleyway is all that remains in the spot where one of the most notorious homes in Britain once stood.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know what, the people who did it ended up in prison and dead, so that's fine by me. We don't need this house anymore. It's a horrible place. Evil seeped into the
Mhm.
walls. Demolishing it, I think, was the best thing to do in this case.
One of the things among everything that really upsets me about this story is I hearing that Fred took his own life at first, I was like,
Mhm.
good,
Yeah.
good. But during the investigation, he
Mhm.
was assigned something called an appropriate adult, which is
Okay.
essentially a social worker.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
he would speak to the social worker both with police and without.
Okay.
And he told the social worker about anywhere from 10 to 20 other victims. He
Oh.
also told his lawyer about anywhere from 5 to 10. So some of these murders, he said that they had conducted around a barn that was
Oh.
far from their home, as well as near an area that he used to work. So the problem is that during the span of time that they were active, there were about 2,000 kids that went missing from care.
Oh my god.
A lot of them have been found,
Okay.
but there are 3 at least specifically that they have not been able to track down in any sense. A lot of them would often take the bus.
Yeah.
They were young girls and they were very much at risk. And despite how hard they've tried to find out what their actual number of victims is,
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who believe that it could have been as high as the 40s
Oh my
and that he
god.
could have started before he met Rose, which we know that he was
Oh,
responsible for deaths at that time.
absolutely.
But with him dying, he is the kind of person where while he was alive, he did do a lot of talking. He was a notorious liar, so it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah,
But if he had stayed alive, I could have seen him giving some sort of deathbed confession or some sort of information in exchange for things that would make his life in prison a little bit better.
definitely.
The thing is, I don't think we're ever going to get that from Rose.
I agree. I think potentially Fred West could have been one of these who a bit like BTK,
Mhm.
where over the years, as he gets bored or feels that attention has maybe drifted away from
Yeah.
him, he'll be like, "Oh, I could tell you about this
Yeah.
one." And then it gets brought up in the news and blah, blah, blah. And not only that is who's to say whether or not these would have been sort of displays of romance for Rose,
Yeah.
right? Because he was very upset when she completely ignored him and kind of threw
Mhm.
him to the wolves and under the bus, for lack of a better joke. But I, in England at this point in time, we didn't have the death penalty or anything.
Yeah.
So he would have been life in prison without the possibility of
Mhm.
parole. A whole life order, I think, is what they call it. Um, but yeah, I mean, Rose is still going strong and she'll be in there until the day she
Oh,
dies.
yeah. With Mary Bascom,
Yes.
in, I believe, 2021,
Okay.
they were heavily investigating her case,
Mhm.
and they thought that they had found some information about what had happened to her,
Okay.
as well as remains,
Yeah.
and it was proven not to be hers.
I
So
mean, so sad that if
yeah.
it's not hers, it's also someone else's.
Exactly. So it's one of those things where I don't think we're ever going to find out the truth. I always hope when I see cases brought back up from a while ago, like
Mhm.
with this documentary being out, that it might inspire people to investigate
Yes.
more and maybe we will find out. But it looks like they disposed of these bodies in a number of different places that, for
Mhm.
all we know now, what was once a farmhouse could have an apartment building on top of it now.
100%. I wonder why he would admit to a handful. I mean, obviously he got caught for a couple, so he
Yeah.
didn't really have much of a choice but to admit to it. But why give some up, but then claim complete like ignorance of others? Like, if it really was him or him and Rose that got to marry Bastom, I guess it would have just been him at the time because it was
Yeah.
before he met Rose. But if he did get to marry Bastholm, if he is the one that murdered her or is the one responsible for her disappearance, why are you lying about it? Why would you hold that in?
I think the murders that he confessed to, with the exception of, I believe, Charmaine,
Okay.
they were all buried in the home. And he knew
Oh,
that they were going to look everywhere that they could in that home, and he
got
couldn't get
it.
away with those. The others are in places where they might never think to look. So he probably just didn't bother.
Well, and like you say, it at one point could have been a barn or a farmhouse or whatever,
Mhm.
could be completely demolished and be a block of flats
Yeah.
now, right? So, ugh. What a yucky story.
Yeah.
I am glad we're at the end. It's a very interesting story,
It
but
is.
holy cow, is it a deviant, perverted, and warped
It
story.
was a difficult one.
No kidding.
I wanna talk about
Yeah.
your upcoming journey that you're going on.
Oh, yeah. It's been a long time since I've been out of the country,
Yeah.
but finally saved up all my pennies, and I'm going back to the UK for a visit with my grandparents. Now, we've been kind of waiting for a good time to do this and figured since I'm going to be visiting, what better time? We'd like to cover the Yorkshire Ripper very soon.
Mhm.
And my grandparents have I don't know, local ties to the area. They were
Yes.
around it all happening. So what we'd like to do is cover the tale, the true crime story of the Yorkshire Ripper. And then I'm going to hopefully have a little interview with my grandparents while I'm in the UK about what it was like to be there during everything that was happening and the investigation and the fear in the community and all that good stuff. So yeah, stay tuned for that,
Very
guys.
exciting.
Yeah.
As for the time that Charlotte is gone, we are in episode overload right now.
Yeah.
We're trying to get all of our stuff recorded to release
Mhm.
while she's gone. So hopefully we won't have any breaks. That's kind of the goal right
Yeah.
now. But very exciting stuff, and I can't wait to
Mhm.
hear it.
I think as well, because we do, record week to week, sort of we record and release,
Mhm.
very actually, I don't think we've really ever done it before where we've pre-planned and pre-recorded
Yeah,
stuff. So I feel like it's almost, another toe in the, like, big girl
I know,
podcast sort
right?
of realm that we're able to, like, have a little more time to pre-record things.
Yes.
So, yeah, I see it as a good thing.
Speaking of good things, we want to talk about Patreon.
Of
If you
course.
want early episode reveals, you can sign up for the free tier. The paid tiers get access to Discord, video
Mhm.
versions of the episodes, and a bunch of extra stuff. We do want to thank our top tier, our Grim VIPs.
The wonderful and fabulous Mayhem Mudkip, Nova, Lisa, Brian, Kevinus Musicus, Steven Centauri, Bob, Paranoid Pop Rocks, Judy, and Atlantean Jedi.
Thank you, thank
Thank you,
you.
thank you. You are wonderful, wonderful human beings, and your support is always, always appreciated.
Thank you so much for listening. This has been
The
The
Grim
Grim
Curriculum.
Curriculum.
Discovered in 2001, so very recently, there is a snail that has a shell composed completely of iron. It's called the scaly-footed snail.
I love
It
him.
lives on geothermal vents in the Indian Ocean,
Mm-hmm.
and they're basically little armored guys, and they live in boiling,
Mm-hmm.
boiling water temperatures. So cool. I love nature.
Bye.
Bye.